All right, so now we're going to begin color correcting and then into color grading. Before we jump into color correction, we're going to take a look at something called the Color Checker Passport. This is something that I have in my toolkit, in my camera bag, when I'm running and gunning, when I'm running doing projects, film projects and video projects. It has a couple things. It helps us keep in check as far as our colors being accurate, 100% accurate. Plus, if you're using different types of cameras, mixing models and brands of cameras in with your set and your project, this helps keep your colors accurate, and it helps you match cameras together. And you'll see that. You see what I'm talking about in just a minute. So first, let's take a look at this shot. This is just an image I downloaded so you can get familiar with the Checker Passport. So here we have a kid holding up the Color Checker Passport by X-Rite. And you have the red, orange, yellow, green, blue. You've got like a purple and a magenta. I think you have a cyan in here as well, probably right here. Same colors down here. Now you also have different types of grays. You've got black all the way up to white with a 50% gray there. So black, white, you've got a 50% gray. Is that 50% is actually right here, 25% gray is right here, and you have a couple other shades of gray. Now, let's take a look at a couple things. So let's open up, we're going to use Lumetri Scopes. And let me go to Window, Workspaces. I'm in my color workspace, and I want to see Lumetri Scopes. Here they are. I have them open on a different screen. Now, we're going to look at this image right here and this right here. So you can see our magenta, so red, magenta, blue, cyan, green, and yellow. Okay, this is your color wheel. All right, these right here, what I've got going on is basically what we're looking at is our vector scope YUV and our waveform RGB. So waveform RGB is right here, right? Looks like waves. And then our vector scope YUV, which is this right here. Now, our waveform RGB stacks our red, green, and blues on top of each other. I could click the Parade RGB, and you can see them separate. These two are basically the same. They're just over the top of each other, and then you've got luminance over the top of that. That's where you see the white. Okay. I tend to not use a Parade RGB. Yes, it is handy, but I get all that same data right here, so I just kind of work with these main two when I'm color correcting and color grading. So let's take a look here. Now, I tend to work top to bottom for the most part when it comes to color, and we're going to use Lumetri Color to make some corrections and make sure that this is accurate. So if nothing is open, first thing I'm going to do is say look for white balance. I'm going to click that. And I'm going to use this selection tool right here. I'm going to click that little eyedropper tool. And I know that this is white, and I know that this is white right here. So I'm going to click that. And you can see just by doing that, I'm going to hit Control-Z. Watch this change, and you'll see this change. And you might actually even see, if you're looking close enough, you'll see some color change on the kid here. So I'm going to click that again. And it popped a little bit. You saw the red boost a little bit. You saw a little bit of red in his cheeks. Some things happened here. Okay. So that's the white. So that looks pretty good. We have some cyan that's a little oversaturated, so we can adjust for that a little bit. But if we've got like saturation here, we can expand tone out. We've got exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks, things we can adjust. Now, when we look at our RGB Parade or our waveform RGB, 255 or 100, 100 is a percentage, 255 is pure white. The only time you'd really have this all the way up to the top is if you're outside shooting at the sun, or you're shooting at a light bulb directly into the light. Then it's going to be really super bright. And you'll never have anything completely at 0, which is totally black. Unless you've got unless you're in a room with no windows and the doors are closed and the light switches off. It's completely black. That's the only time you'd ever have anything that's completely black. So it's definitely a good idea to kind of keep that up off of 0 and less than 255 or 100. So I like to keep my whites or brights around 95, 96-ish, kind of how this is. And my blacks, I tend to keep around 7 or 10%. So this is a little dark here, but it's not too bad. So what I could do is bring my blacks up a little bit, just like so. Okay, it's a little bit soft. And just by doing that, you actually could see my cyan is not as saturated as it was a second ago. So let's take a look at the correction for this image, and we can go into extreme detail on this. I'm going to show you one way of doing this, and then we'll go from there. Now, if you're using DaVinci Resolve, they have some tools that are really easy to, they're very intuitive when it comes to using a color checker passport, where you just create a grid over it, and it just finds it. It's really cool. Unfortunately, Premiere is not there when it comes to this. So let's take a look. We've got in our effects controls panel, I'm going to go to opacity. I'm going to create a box, just like this. And in fact, I'm going to come down here and zoom in to about 150%. And I'm going to bring my box down. Whoop. There we go. I'm going to bring my box down here to, we'll say, red. I'm just going to bring these points in. And I'm just going to cover up everything but one box. And I know this is a bit tedious, especially if you're working on a bigger project, but it's worth it. Now, I don't want to feather that, so I'm going to bring the feather to 0. So now I'm just looking at the red. Okay? And you can see that it's not pointing at red. It's actually kind of off a little bit towards the magenta a little bit. So let's adjust that. Let's correct that. So first thing I'm going to do is, that's not creative. I'm going to skip creative right now. So I started with basic, did the white balance. We have that accurate. Exposure is accurate. We know that. So we're good with that. We're going to close that one out. And I'm going to come down to curves. Now curves has a ton of stuff. If you don't have it open all the way, you can do some really basic stuff with RGB curves. But let's open hue saturation curves up. Here's where we have a ton of different features. This is really cool. So we've got hue versus saturation. So color versus how saturated the color is. Hue versus hue, which basically is the red more magenta? Is it more yellow? Hue versus luma, which is red, the color, versus white. You know, how much color is in that color, or is it more white? White versus saturation. So is there more light versus more color? And then saturation versus saturation. So let's take a look at, what did we just do? Oh, there we go. So let's take a look at hue versus saturation. So first thing I'm going to do is grab my eyedropper tool and click right there. And it created 3 dots, 1, 2, and 3. So now if I take my center dot, you can see it's removing the saturation. If I crank it up, it's going to increase the saturation, right? Now what it's also doing is pinning. It's pinning the outside. So I can only, anything I change between point A and point C, I guess, that's what's being adjusted. So that kind of adds to the saturation. That's not bad there. Let's go hue versus hue, because we have to get it over to the red. So I'm going to say, again, eyedropper. And there's our 1, 2, 3 points. And there you go. See, if I drop it, it's going to go. You can even see a color bar here on the right-hand side. I need to make it more red. So there you go. All right. And I'm going to boost this up a bit. And that's pretty accurate right there. Now I could take and move this, double click this mask. All right. So now I could just delete that mask altogether. Goodbye. And you can see the red. Let me zoom out. The red is definitely more red, and so on. So you could actually correct this now for each color along the way. It takes a little bit of time, but in the end, again, it will be extremely accurate. So if you, even this one up here, if you went ahead and did the red, the yellow, the green, cyan, blue, and purple, or well, magenta, that will get you going. So really, these right here, this whole line is what you would need to correct, and that would give a nice, basically your primary colors and secondary colors. That would get you the colors that you would need to get that accurate. Okay, so that's color correction. Then we have color grading, and we'll get to that in just a second. So let's go ahead and take a look at the project. So I'm going to delete this, and let's move into an actual project. And I'm going to move this over here for now, so you can see what I'm doing. Now here I've got a video project that I'm currently working on, and we used a Mavic drone. We've used a Panasonic GH5, Sony A7R2, and a Canon EOS R. So we have a bunch of different types of footage from throughout the day, and you can see that the color isn't completely the same throughout, even though like these two shots really, well, this shot and this shot were in the same room essentially. The lighting is slightly different from one spot to the next. So we're going to have some color correction here. So we're going to go through and do some color correction on all of these shots to make sure that each shot, the color is correct individually. All right, so we're going to start with this one right here. And I'm going to find, I don't really have anything white, but we're going to find something that is white. Let's see. It's pretty close. Okay. And of course, we're going to look at this. So there's a little bit of yellow, more yellow or green that I would like to have. So I'm going to make a slight adjustment there. Whoop. Let's bring the exposure up. Now, expanding the contrast takes, as you see, everything kind of like a rubber band. It stretches it all out. You can adjust the highlights where it's just adjusting the top half of your video. The shadows, which is kind of the bottom half or the bottom third of your video. And then blacks is the total bottom, whites is the total top. Okay? Just something like that might be all right. We are kind of hitting the bottom a little bit, so we might bring the black up a little bit. Yeah, it's good right there for now. And then let's go into curves, because I don't like a lot of this green. So let's see here. We might find... See, so I can even make some of this stuff a little bit more green. So if I select a color, like say out here, I can add more green back in. Now you have to be careful because a lot of this image is going to turn green. That's pretty close. We're going to go with that. That's not bad. Now I know that this shot, of course, is the same shot. So I could actually take this, right click on it, say copy. It's the same environment, so I'm going to right click and paste attributes. Lumetri color. There we go. So now these two are the same. A little bit bright, so let's see if we can make some adjustments on this one, and we might end up replacing the other one. Yeah, let's go with that. Copy. Let's come back over here. Paste attributes. Now let's take a look at the effects controls. So since this already had it on it, it actually duplicated it. So I want to remove the first one. And now these two images will look very similar. Okay. Let's take a look at this shot. So here we have, she's wearing white. I know the dress is white. We'll click this and we'll find a piece of white. There we go. And now we've got blue. And it's awfully dark. So we're going to bring this up. All right. Yep. And then you're just going to work this. There's a little too much blue here. You can see that the blue is popping a little high. So another way we can adjust this is coming down to our color wheels. This is another way of color correcting. Now you can see our highlights it's very blue. So we've got blue and all of this. So if it's too blue, what I'm going to do is pull it away. Just kind of ever so slightly up and to the left, away from that blue. Until I've got a nice balance. What I can also do to help me is effects controls. We'll make a, this time we'll do a circle. Okay. And I'm just going to bring this circle down like so to a spot that's white. Okay, so that's white. Oh, for starters, make sure you're masking the opacity. There we are. Because masking the effect itself, the Lumetri controls, that's not going to help you at all. All right, so there we go. In theory, that should be white, right? Look at that. It should be white. We're seeing red, green, and blue. So we're going to make that adjustment. We're going to bring the red down. Ooh, that's pretty close right there. Less blue. That's pretty close. So I'm looking at this right here. I'm not even looking at this. I'm actually reading this information. You can see it's dead center. There's like no saturation. There's really no color or very little color. Now I'm going to go to effects controls, delete that mask, and there we are. So now that should be accurate in theory. And we can do some other things to bring the skin tones back. But that's how you would correct that. So you still have a lot of blue in the image that we can correct. Now, one last thing for color correction, we can bring the skin tones back, and I'll show you how to do that right now. We're going to use the HSL secondary. And this is pretty cool. It's like masking in a way. So we're going to set color. So we're going to select her skin tone, okay? And now we have some things to adjust. And you can see as I make some adjustments here, it's going to grab her skin tones. Okay? And it'll grab similar colors throughout the scene. We can say color gray. Just kind of expand those out until we've got everything that we need. Okay. Denoise. We'll remove some of the noise from our selection. Blur, we'll also blur that. So you can see it kind of takes care of some of the other craziness in our shot. And I'm going to turn that off. So now we can actually see our image. Again, we can click on these three dots right here to expand out shadows, midtones, and highlights. And we can start working our skin tone. So think of this as like playing with a mask, right? So I'm going to push it up and to the left to bring some of those reds back in our skin tones. I might even bring the shadows or the midtones up a bit, so make it brighter. Might even push the shadows up and see what happens with the shadows. And the highlights. Let's bring the highlights up a little bit as well. I'm going to use this plus tool on my eyedropper. I'm going to click the top of her hand. Ah, there we are. That brought some of that in. Now I have to fix that gray. Let's take a look. Because we're getting some of the dress in here. So we're going to bring that back down. Let's go like that. There we are. That's a little bit better. I think I can work with that. Okay, and that's how you adjust your skin tones. Now you can overdo it. We don't want to do that. Okay, we just want enough so it doesn't turn blue. Okay, and your skin tones technically should ride somewhere around this line here between the red and the yellow. Okay, so you're going to go through and adjust the colors for all of your images to make sure that they're correct. And then in the next phase, we're going to go ahead and color grade and add a color grade to the video.